Hi again, this is David. Thank you very much once again for making it to this video. And thank you too for watching the first two videos. Now, today we shall cover the 3 subconscious reprogramming secrets to finally getting unstuck in your life. Great, so we start with secret number 1. The best way to get unstuck and succeed at anything is to change the quantum field that literally structures the objects and events in your life. And you do that by changing your all-day, everyday vibrational state of being. Now, that's a whole bunch of words that might sound confusing at first, right? Yet, they will make total sense in the next few minutes. We are about to get scientific in a way that you will see exactly how the objects and events that surround you come to be there. You know, the people, the experiences, the jobs, the conditions, the events, the dramas that surround you in your life. We're gonna discover how all those things come to be around you and how some of them actually stick on you, you know. And then once you know this secret, the whole world will make sense. Let me explain. You see, most people who have tried everything and are still stuck think that the best way to succeed at getting unstuck is to work incredibly hard, to struggle, and to fight themselves until, hopefully, they make it. The old map tells us that the way to fix problems is to work harder, to fight ourselves, to struggle, to push until, hopefully, maybe things work out. And that's what the old map tells us. It's a very mechanical map, the old map is. Now, the new map says that the best way to succeed at getting unstuck is to change your all-day, everyday vibrational state of being. Because this is what automatically changes the quantum field that literally structures you and the objects and events in your life. As long as your predominant vibrational state remains the same, your life will remain the same, no matter what else you try. Working incredibly hard, struggling and fighting yourself won't help if your predominant vibrational state is unchanged, if it is left the same as it always was last year, last week, last month, 10 years ago. If it's the same, everything stays the same. Now, as proof of this, how many of us know people who work like dogs? Literally work like dogs, or like, I don't know, something that works very hard, like 18 hours a day or 14, just killing themselves basically. And maybe they even fight themselves like they're their own worst enemy. And they still remain stuck. How many of us know people like that? Do you know anyone like that? I do, and the truth is, I even used to be that guy. So, changing your all-day, everyday vibrational state of being. What do I mean by that? Well, let me first assure you that I struggled with myself for years to escape the third world lifestyle. I worked like a dog, and all I got for my efforts was the same crap, different flies kind of thing happening to me. Until I changed my vibration. And what I learned from that life experience was that a vibrational state simply creates more of the same. For example, wanting creates more wanting. Struggle creates more struggle. Desperation creates more desperation. Scarcity creates more scarcity. Violence creates more violence. Hate creates more hate. Love creates more love. Peace creates more peace. Abundance creates more abundance. Vibrational states simply create more of the same. And so to shift, to transform, you must first transform your predominant vibrational state of being. And so now we can summarize what we have covered so far. The lie that creates struggle and being stuck says that we must struggle to have what we desire so that we can then do what we want to do, and that will allow us to be what we wish to be. For example, we must struggle to get more money so we can then literally buy the new lifestyle that we desire to buy, or to have, or buy the solutions to our problems. And then that will allow us to then be who we wish we could be. In other words, the old map of reality tells us we must have so that we can do, so that we can be. Have, do, be is the old map that causes suffering and staying stuck. Now, let's talk about the map that works based on the way life works. Be, do, have. The B in that equation stands for state of being, which is the same as saying vibrational state. So when you shift your state of being, it automatically shifts your vibration, and that automatically shifts your life and presents new choices of what you can do and have automatically. Why does this work? It works because our daily lives are composed of objects and events. Wouldn't you agree that throughout your day, your life is surrounded by objects and events? You know, objects such as people, things, trees, cars. You know, the people and the environment that you experience around you. Now, all objects and events are made of atoms. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, this is kindergarten science. Everybody knows that life, or our physical universe, all of it, from the smallest to the biggest, is all made of a collection of atoms. This computer that you may be watching this video on is a bunch of atoms. The sound of my voice is a bunch of atoms. You know, the sound is compressed air, and air is made of oxygen atoms, carbon dioxide atoms, and so on. A planet is a whole big collection of atoms. A person is a collection of atoms. Even light, the light that your eyes pick up, is a collection of subatomic particles, called photons. Agreed? So there's no exception. Everything, all objects and events are made of atoms. Okay? Colonies, collections, massive collections of atoms. All right? Agreed? Good. Now, all atoms, all of them, are made of subatomic particles, such as protons, neutrons, electrons, photons, and many more. And these subatomic particles are energy, quantum energy. They're not made of energy, they are energy. An electron is a unit of energy, a proton is a unit of energy, and so on. So everything is made of quantum energy. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the world of quantum energy is a strange, weird world that is quite counterintuitive and sometimes tricky to understand. But it is real science, real proven science, 100 years old science. So don't worry if some of this comes off as tricky to understand initially. That happens to everyone. I assure you, however, that soon you're going to get all this, and it's going to be simple for you. Even if you hate science and physics, we will really simplify it for you, and you will actually enjoy this journey. Okay? Great. So let's move on. Now, energy is 99.999999% space. You and everything around you is 99.99999% space, and only 0.0000001% is, in quotes, solid. Okay? That's how energy is, scientifically speaking. Energy is mostly space, which means that physical reality is mostly space. Now, you can Google this up if you don't believe me. You're going to find tons of scientific papers on this. Anyways, although the world feels solid to human senses, it is anything but solid. In fact, it is so fluid beyond our imagination. The sensation of being solid is just a trick played on our perception. It was designed that way for the game of life to work. Now, the 0.00001% solid matter is an ever-changing force field of charged particles of light and waves of matter, which, to your senses, appear as solid stuff. What I'm trying to make clear here is that an atom, any atom, doesn't matter what atom you pick, any atom, is not a solid thing that just sits there waiting to be touched. Not at all. An atom is almost 99.9999% space. And the parts of it that appear solid are simply oscillating fields. And it is the coming together of these fields, the push and pull forces created by these fields, that makes the world seem solid to you. It's like, remember when we were kids and we used to play with magnets? Yeah? When you brought two magnets together and you try to push the north pole of one magnet to touch the north pole of the other magnet, and then the magnets refuse to touch, they were repelling each other. Those kinds of forces are what you experience as solid. Yeah? No matter how painful a slap across your face feels like, there was nothing solid there. It is a force meeting another force field, in a sense. I'm simplifying it here. So solid isn't actually solid. And this is the first key in realizing that getting unstuck is incredibly easy and instant once you change your vibration. Are you getting some of this so far? Now, I understand that there may be a lot of questions, just like I had a lot of questions when I first discovered this information. But just hang in there, and as long as you get a little bit of it, as long as you're getting some of it, the rest will clear up as we go on. So don't worry about that. But are you starting to see how things could be very different from what you were told they were? Are you getting this? I mean, does some of this make sense to you so far? Yeah? In fact, did you know that because of the fact that an atom is almost entirely made of space, because of that fact, and that is, by the way, a scientific fact, if you were to remove the empty space from the atoms of all the people on Earth, then the entire human race, all those 7 billion people, could fit into the volume of one sugar cube. I mean, that is how much space is in physical things. Physical reality is a hologram of ever-changing force fields. That is what so-called solid matter really is. It isn't really solid. Great. Next is a discovery that energy, the quantum energy, that, this quantum energy that is all atoms. And as we found out, all physical reality is all atoms in, collections of atoms. So it's all quantum energy. Anyways, this quantum energy always responds to human intent. It responds to your thoughts and feelings, your vibration. Because you see, my friends, thoughts and feelings are electromagnetic structures that form your vibration. Literally, an idea, a thought, or an emotion is an electromagnetic structure. Thoughts are things. Well, there's more to that, of course, we're simplifying it here greatly. But generally speaking, thoughts, emotions are electromagnetic structures, literally, In fact, have you just play this game? I would like you to recall the last time you walked into a situation of conflict. For example, let's say you walked into a bunch of guys who are fighting or arguing, You walked into a room where these 2 or 3 or more people were in a heated argument, or they were fighting, or whatever it was, yeah? Do you remember that you could literally feel the tension in the air? You may even have tasted it, yeah? You could feel the vibe, and the vibe felt, hostile, yeah? Your energy system picked up on that environment, and you could feel the tension in the room as those people argued or fought. Now let me ask you this. Do you know why you felt those things? It's because the thoughts and emotions, the vibrations that were being discharged in that situation are real things, electromagnetic structures that were then interacting with your own energy field. You get how this works now? And that is what caused you to sense the vibe in the room, the vibration in the room, literally. Now, here is the punchline. So listen carefully. This energy flashes in and out of existence 50 billion times per second. And it reconstructs itself into what you see around you precisely because of your vibration. In other words, your world is a mirror of your consciousness, and that is its purpose. That is how the system is built. Your vibration literally determines your life experience, literally. And this game of life, this game space, was built using a quantum field that was designed to automatically recreate itself to match your vibration. Now, for those of us who are not scientists and can't be bothered to go dig into the 100 years of scientific papers written on quantum physics, there is a very cool program that aired on PBS a while back called The Fabric of the Cosmos. And before that, we had the documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know? And in those 2 shows, we saw that quantum energy is not a static thing that just sits there. Not at all. It is instead a godlike substance that doesn't obey the laws of space and time as we know them, doesn't obey Newtonian physics, in other words. And it can be at different places simultaneously, and it flashes in and out of nothingness billions of times a second, and much, much more. It's quite literally a miraculous substance, yet we measure it in physics today, in a branch of physics called quantum physics. And so the chair that you sit on seems to just stay there to your eyes. You know, your eyes tell you the chair has been there since yesterday, it was there the day before, and I'm going to find it there tomorrow. But if you looked at that same chair using an electron microscope, you would realize that the subatomic particles that comprise that chair are not static at all. And this is what gives you the chance for miraculous change, the quantum possibilities within all life. 50 billion chances for change per second. Isn't that incredible? And to think that this is a built-in property of nature is amazing, right? Okay, so maybe you still need more evidence before you may believe this. I understand that. And I assure you that we have tons of evidence for you, and I will show it to you later on. But if this turns out to be true, isn't it just awesome news? Yes? Great, right? You see, the real secret to realize here is that everything on this planet is frequency. Everything. When you look down and you see a rock, what you're looking at is a frequency. You're looking at a frequency. But your eyes convert that frequency to an electric current that travels down your optic nerve and into your brain, and then your brain then creates an image that it labels as a rock. But it is frequency all the same. And then you bend down and you touch the rock, and the frequency that is your hand interacting with the frequency that is the rock gives a sensation of solidity, of touch, but it is nevertheless two frequencies in interaction. You are frequency, and so is everything else. And so your world reconstructs itself to what you see around you precisely because of your vibration. You see, everything is frequency. So we're dealing with vibration. We're talking of harmony, of attraction. Are you seeing how the law of attraction works? It does have a scientific basis. Consciousness has physics. And as you're starting to appreciate, there's layers and layers and layers to reality. So on one level, your eyes tell you this is a rock. But at another level, that rock is vibrating with atoms and everything. At another level, that's a different thing altogether. At another level, you understand what I'm trying to say here? This is what makes everything that we are learning about possible. The very science of the construction of the reality that we live in. And so, the only way to get unstuck and succeed at anything is to change the quantum field that literally structures the objects and events in your life. And this happens automatically when you change your all-day, everyday vibrational state of being. And to change your vibration, you simply change your core belief systems, meaning that you change your subconscious map of reality, your idea of what you believe you are and what you believe the world is. This is what sets your predominant vibration, your concept of what you think you are and what you think the world is. This is what sets your all-day, everyday vibration. Changing your core belief system sounds easier said than done, and I will agree with you on that. It can be tough to change what you think you are, what you believe you are, and what you believe the world is. In fact, most of us find it tremendously difficult to even recognize our beliefs, let alone change them. Yeah? Some of us even find it next to impossible. And that is why we stay stuck. And I can assure you that I myself, again, being a normal person just like you, I also found it terribly difficult to change my belief system initially. And that was until I discovered the new information that made this easy and possible. And this is the information that we're talking about in these videos going forward. In fact, some beliefs are so ingrained in us that we actually identify with them. In other words, they form our identity, and we find it hard to separate from them, to get enough distance from them, so as to see that we are not the beliefs. We are so into them that we think we are what we believe. And this is called identification. We identify with a belief so much that we think it is a fact of life and not a belief. We believe it is a fact. Yeah? Yet the funny thing is, just about all facts of life are beliefs about life. I'm yet to find even one so-called fact of life that is not just a belief about life. Even gravity, as crazy as this sounds, is a perspective, meaning that from a different perspective, gravity is not what we think it is. But it is possible to change core belief systems. The difficulty is only in the method. If you use the right method, it is easy. If you don't use the right method, then it's difficult or next to impossible. Okay? So it's all in the method. The difficulty is in the method. Whether you can change a belief or not is actually easy. It's actually simple. It depends on the method. Now, I'll show you some very good methods later on. Okay, great. So let's move on to the next secret. Secret number 2. The story that you tell yourself about what you are and what your world is was randomly built from past conditioning, based on the lies that we were innocently told while growing up. This story forms your predominant vibration, your subconscious map of reality, for that matter. And that is why you may still be stuck with re-experiencing your old story, like literally stuck repeating the past, basically. Yeah. Now, change the story you tell yourself about who you are or what you are and what the world is, and your vibration will automatically change. And when that happens, your world will automatically change. The big idea here is that your self-view and your worldview is absolutely the only reason that you're stuck in certain areas of your life. The only reason. Most people who've tried everything and are still stuck believe that their self-view and worldview has no effect on their personal reality. Many people believe that a gazillion other factors are the cause of their being stuck. You know, like their parents' fault, or the government's fault, or some idiot's fault, or just bad luck, and so on. But what if the story that you tell yourself about what you are and what your world is has full effect on your personal reality? What if that story is the only the only reason that stands between you and the things that seem so far out of your reach? What if that story is the only thing that really matters, the only thing that is blocking you? What if that's the case? Now, if that's the case, if that turns out to be true, and I'm not insisting it is true, I'm merely suggesting it to you for your consideration. If it turns out to be true that your vibration, your story that you tell yourself about what you are and what your world is the only thing that matters, then the logical conclusion is that it is the only thing that you need to work with or work on. Because, therefore, if you ignore it, then you stay stuck because your story stays the same and your vibration stays the same. Make sense? Now, remember, the stories that we tell ourselves were built from past conditioning, built from past programming, based on the lies that we were innocently told by people who in turn inherited the same lies. Okay? And in turn, those they inherited it from also inherited the same. So it's passed down through generations. We accepted the self-view and worldview that was offered to us from childhood. And we had to accept it. We literally had to, because we wanted to stay safe, we wanted to be loved, we wanted to be accepted, we wanted to belong, we wanted to eat, you know, wanted to survive. And so we just took it in, right? But we never stopped to check to see how accurate that story was. And so the story is the problem. The story that we tell ourselves about what we are and what the world is. Now, what do I mean by that? We have just seen how all the events and objects in our lives are made of atoms, and atoms are energy, and this energy forms the events and objects in our lives at the rate of 50 billion times per second. Based on our consciousness, our state of being, this energy organizes itself in manners and ways that reflect this consciousness, our thoughts and beliefs, our emotions, also known as our predominant 24/7 vibration, our all-day, everyday vibration. Now, the next step then is to see that the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves and about our world is what is our vibration. In other words, our story is our belief system. Our belief system is literally a filter that creates our reality and filters out any other reality that doesn't agree with our belief system. Our belief system is the system of thoughts and thought forms that comprise what we tell ourselves is true about us and our world. And remember, beliefs are thought systems, and thoughts are electromagnetic structures that literally vibrate and attract similar thought forms, and these form the seeds by which larger, bigger, grander manifestations happen. These larger manifestations as objects and events in our lives happen because quantum energy literally always matches our belief system. It takes the thought forms contained by your beliefs or as your beliefs, and it takes those so-called electromagnetic seeds, let's call them that, okay? And through the law of attraction, which is to say the idea that like attracts like, it manifests corresponding outer realities, which means your life's events and objects literally match your belief system. And so it stands that to change your world, you need to change your story, which means change what you believe about yourself and the world, and align it with powerful truths that are going to enable you, instead of with weak lies that actually hinder you. Does that make sense? Are you getting this? Yeah? Okay, so on to secret number 3, which says that you only need to clearly see, literally see and understand without a shadow of doubt that you are an unlimited, magnificent, infinite and eternal divine being, deliberately having a human experience. And then you get to understand why you're doing that. Why are you doing this? Why are you coming from being an unlimited, magnificent, infinite, and eternal divine being? Why are you coming from that position to have a deliberate human experience? Why is that happening? Once you get those two and you figure that out, then automatically your limited small ego self that is causing you all the pain and frustration, that will automatically step aside. And then your divine self will take over, and it's going to amaze you with the truth of who you really are, what you really are. And in that process, many things will happen, one of which is literally your problems will begin to vanish like the illusions that they are. Yeah? Remember, these problems were based on a very limited self-concept. Once that self-concept changed, they also disappeared with the old concept that also disappeared. You understand? So great. Okay, let's see what that means. The big secret here is that you are source energy itself. And by source energy, we mean that you are the exact same energy that is the universe itself, that created the entire universe. You are one with the Creator, literally a piece of the Maker. Now, in many religions and creation myths, this idea has been expressed in various ways. For example, in the Bible, in Genesis, it says, "Let us make man in our image and likeness." You are literally source energy, having a temporal human experience in the game of life. Source energy wearing a human vessel, a human vehicle, a human body. Your body is only a highly advanced avatar, a biological vessel. But it isn't who you are. It isn't who you really are. However, on the contrary, most people who have tried everything and are still stuck have been conditioned and raised to believe that they are only human, literally physical meat with a brain, and perhaps with a little bit of spirit somewhere. They believe they are not source energy. They believe they are separate from the Creator, that they are anything but but the Creator. In fact, they actively deny that they are one with the Creator. They deny that it's even possible. They can't see it. You know, they can't see how they can be worthy to be one with that same source energy that creates the universe, you know, and beyond. And so, unfortunately, they adopt a very weak self-view and worldview that they operate from. Now, compare this weak belief system with the belief system of someone who sees themselves as one with the very creation that is the entire universe. Can you see the massive difference in power and manifestation between those two kinds of people, the victim and the creator? Can you see the difference in power and manifestation capabilities? So people who are stuck tend to believe that they are victims of life and not creator beings, and definitely not one with source energy. Now flip that position. What if you could somehow clearly see, literally see and understand without a shadow of doubt that you are an unlimited, magnificent, infinite, and eternal divine being, deliberately having a human experience, and then understand why you're doing that? If you could do that, yeah? If you could do that, just take a moment here. Actually, let's slow down. Don't worry about how you can do all this. Simply imagine, what if you could somehow do that? What if you could see yourself as one with source energy? What if you could know yourself as source energy incarnate? Yeah? If you could do that, can you then see that your limited small ego self that you had identified with earlier, the same limited ego self that was causing you the pain and the being stuck and the problems, can you see how that would automatically step aside? And then your divine self would take over. Can you see that? Don't worry about how. For now, just imagine what your life would be like if you could somehow do this. We'll get to the later on how. For now, I just need you guys to see the possibility, not how to get there. Just see the possibility. Remember, when your self-view changes, your life changes to match the new self-view, just like we saw earlier. And the same goes for your worldview. I'm sure you've noticed this happening in your own life in the past, whereby maybe you had something that used to give you problems in the past, but then today that thing doesn't give you problems anymore because somehow you changed, you transformed as a person, correct? Yes? Everybody has an example of something like this. It could be as simple as, learning how to drive a car. You are afraid, then you overcome your fear, you learn how to drive, and now it's no longer a problem. Or it could be something even bigger. It could be something as big as maybe you used to date or have relationships with certain kind of people that were abusive, and then you changed and you became different as a person, and all of a sudden you are no longer attracting these kind of people, and you're no longer being involved in those kind of relationships. Can you see that, how that happens? So we all have examples of how this actually works. So now all we're doing is upsizing it to divinity level. That's all we're doing here. We're not doing anything new. We're just upsizing. That's all we're doing here. Okay, so now imagine what a massively liberating life change is in store for you if you can manage to see yourself not as a small, limited, conditioned, only human ego self that you've been programmed to believe that you are, and instead to realize yourself as an infinite, eternal, divine being having a temporal human experience. For a start, if you saw and believed yourself in this way, a divine being having a temporal human experience, your day-to-day experiences would take on new meaning. Suddenly, you'd not see yourself as a victim of anything. Suddenly, the meaning that you gave to the objects and events in your life would change. Suddenly, what you attract to your life would change, and how you react to it would change. When your self-view changes, your life changes to match the new self-view. And when your worldview changes, your life changes to match the new worldview. In other words, when your story changes, your world changes. When your story changes, your world changes. Make sense to you guys? Yeah? But how do you do that? How do you change your self-view and worldview in this way? How? Well, the easiest way that I know of, that I've ever seen to quickly change your self-view and worldview in a powerful, lasting way, and all the way down to the subconscious level, is to study or look at the very construction of the game of life. In other words, your body, your psyche, your physical environment, reality itself, to look at it. How is it put together? How does it work? And to do so beyond what you've been led to believe, beyond your conditioning and programming. And that is a keyword, beyond. And so simply by studying, you gain a new understanding. And this new understanding automatically overturns your limiting beliefs. Makes sense, right? I mean, look at your own life. Maybe today you drive a car, but at some time in the past you didn't know how to drive a car, and you may have been maybe even afraid of driving. But by going to driving school or somebody teaching you, whatever, you got to understand driving and you got to understand how a car works. And then suddenly your fears dropped, and then your life changed the minute you became a driver because of a new understanding. You see, the transformation came because of a new understanding. Understanding. Before becoming a driver, you are stuck waiting for people to give you a ride. But once you became a driver, your life changed. You got new independence and freedom. You changed, your life changed. You see? Now, that model also applies to what we're talking about here. It is as simple as opening up reality, literally opening it, like the way you'd open up a clock to see what the pieces are inside the clock that makes it tick, you know. And then you simply look at it. You open life and then you just look at it. That's all. You understand how it works. That's all. In other words, you first have to reveal the subconscious. You first have to reveal the subconscious for you to then be able to reprogram it. The revealing, the study to understand, is what liberates you from the old limited problematic beliefs, and then the reprogramming is what then empowers you. Now, I don't want to trivialize this. I mean, yes, it is that simple, literally, but that doesn't mean it is easy. You see, the difficulty comes from the fact that your old self is a structure. It literally is. And this structure will try to defend itself and to maintain its existence. It doesn't want to just disappear, you know. And that's also partly why we stay stuck, because we face resistance. And so you will have to be aware of this resistance, and the way to overcome resistance is to get real, to get raw with yourself. In other words, this journey is going to require you to tell the truth to yourself, to be honest with yourselves. You know, you can't bullshit yourself. You can't hide and pretend and mask. You have to be raw with yourself, raw with your emotions, raw with your thoughts. For in telling yourself the truth without escaping, and in this open and unconditional emotional flow without trying to block any particular emotions, this is where you will find your liberation and transformation. Does that sound fair enough to you guys? Feels right, yeah? Okay, great.